Welcome. In this video, I'm going to be breaking down some of the Venture Map 101. Now, what is the Venture Map? That's a story I've told a few times. I've told that origin story on YouTube, on TikTok, and perhaps we'll get into a little bit of it today. I'm joined by my colleague, Mr. John. He's going to be backstage supporting this conversation for you. Now, the reason that we're really coming to the table to do this is to build in public. Oftentimes, entrepreneurs, business owners share a veneer of what it takes to build a business in reality. And something that we're committed to is visibility, both in the product we're building and the services we render, but also in the way that we represent ourselves in the world. Now, although build in public has become very much in vogue or in style by a lot of people, I think it's not just a cliche. It's not a stereotype. It's actually something that has meaning to it. And my hope is that we can align with that meaning, that authenticity, and share some of who we are, what we believe in, and what we love doing. So, with that being said, I'm a big believer in the share and the show and tell approach. So I'm going to share my screen here. All right. Now, I'm inside of the Miro platform. Now, I'm going to view this as a welcome aboard type of thing. And if you've never heard of Miro, or maybe you have, but this is your first real look into it, this is Miro. Now, there's a ton of templates for you to choose from, tons of templates. There's a whole Miro-verse, literally, a creator marketplace designed just to deploy templates at scale. So there's a template for almost anything you can think of, large or small. But fundamentally, this is the platform. I've had the privilege of teaching a number of people how to use Miro over the years, young and old, solopreneurs, team members in larger companies, and everyone in between. There's a few things that you need to know in order to be successful. First is the navigation. Whether you're on a mouse, whether you're on a trackpad, it's going to be the same. Similar to Google Maps, you can pan, zoom out, you can zoom in, you can pan left, right, up, and down. Now we've got a few tools. We can use text. Now, just like you would expect, you can resize, you can change the color, change the font, all of that type of stuff. And there's a little bit better of perspective. Zoom in and out, pan left and right, up and down. It's free form, kind of a creator. Now, something that we don't usually use in the early stages of training folks is a card. This can be transferred out to Jira. This can be used as a task assigned to people, all of that. But typically we'll go straight from text to post-it notes and shapes. Now, if you can appreciate those three key elements, shapes, notes, and text, you're pretty much where you need to be to understand the Venture Map. So several years ago, I would introduce this concept much like I am now at an overview, and then I would get into the various pieces and parts. For example, you can zoom in pretty far and look at this handsome gentleman. This Mr. John's on the line with me today, providing some much needed production support. We can zoom all the way in though and see details, and we can zoom all the way out. But what I've found after doing that many countless times is that oftentimes leads to overwhelm. So I'm going to work on honing in a story that I've told a few times, and I'll hope to do it in a coherent, concise way now. So why a venture map, you may ask? What is this all about? And why do you need one? In fact, a lot of people that I've talked about the idea with at the head of it, on the surface level, they think, oh, mapping out a business, that's fine, but that's a luxury. Or we don't really need, we got everything mapped out, we don't really need it mapped out. We use Asana, we're good. And I totally understand that, and I think there's something to be said from a sales process or even a customer development process of problem aware, solution aware. And I think a lot of people may be a problem unaware at some level. So I'll break down some of that here to define the problem as clearly as I can. So Why venture map? Now, you can call it whatever you want to call it. This type of effort has gone by many names over the years. And just venture map is something that kind of stuck with us a while back, and we've had the privilege of deploying venture maps for the better part of 4.5 years now to our clients, and working in fractional COO capacity. But now as we're working to further deploy further productized versions of the venture map, we recognize the need to tell the story of the problems that exist and then the solutions that are a dovetail into that actually meet the need. So first of all, Jocko Willink talks about extreme ownership. If you don't know Jocko, and maybe this is a cool moment in time for a little bit of an alley-oop from John. John, if you want to see if you can do a little Google search and bring me in a screenshot of Jocko over here on the board. Jocko Willink is a Navy SEAL commander and an all-around badass individual. He has New York Times best-selling books, Extreme Ownership, Dichotomy of Leadership, a number of others, awesome podcast, etc. Big fan of Jocko. Now, Jocko says something that I really love. Everything is your fault. He tells a story at the beginning of his first book, and actually elaborates on this in his course. Jocko tells a story about a battle in Ramadi, Iraq, where there was a blue-on-blue incident where friendly fire occurred, and it was a pretty big deal. And in the after-action review, there was a lot of concern: who's going to take the fall for this, that type of thing. And ultimately, Jocko said, "This is my fault. This is my responsibility." He was a senior guy on the ground, and I love that story because that's where there's real stakes, and that's where it requires real character and maturity to belly up to that and own it. And that's exactly what he did. There's a number of situations that Jocko talks about inside of the book and inside of the rest of the stories he's told to provide tangible, realistic examples of what extreme ownership looks like. But we'll see. There we go. Coming through. That's exactly as you would expect a Navy SEAL commander to look. Jocko's an all-around badass human being, of course. Now, we're glad he's on our side in the U.S., that's for sure. Now, to take this concept of extreme ownership into the business world, something I like to ask new entrepreneurs when I meet them is define the elements of a business. And let's see, John, you help me out here with dropping a few of these Post-it notes in. See if you can help me define every element of a business that you possibly can. And there's no wrong answer, right? You've got sales, marketing, ads. That's kind of a nested element, right? Probably nested underneath of marketing. You've got operations, finance, legal, right? The list goes on and on. Strategy, you got processes or SOPs, right? I guess they're kind of different, but they're also related. Now you can see how this journey goes on pretty quickly, and I'm establishing a little bit of relevant common ground here to some of the fundamentals. But at the end of the day, any business owner will be able to point out pretty large gaps in the list. Even if I spent the entire video just attempting to make this list, at the end of the day, it's going to be incomplete. And there's a few reasons for that. One of them is the complexity inside of businesses. Even a simple business is pretty great. There's a lot of variables. And perfect. Thanks, John. So there's an awesome book I've referenced as well. I get a chance to reference a few books here today by Alan Dibb named The One-Page Marketing Plan. And he talks, in that book, he says something that I love. It sticks with me here. He goes, in business, what you don't know will hurt you. Now, maybe Alan Dibb was the originator of this quote. I'm not sure, but I'll just give him a little bit of a shout out. So you think, okay, well, there's two types of things that we don't really know here. Now to start, to even begin defining that, the easy one to define are these unknown variables. Now, maybe you're new to business, maybe you're just super specialized, or maybe you're very experienced. And ultimately, what I think most entrepreneurs, even seasoned entrepreneurs, would agree with me on is there's always unknown variables. There's things that you do not know until you encounter them. Now, as a Marine vet, I like to think of these as IEDs or pitfalls. So, for example, one thing we haven't listed up here is sales funnels. Now, you could argue maybe that's nested within marketing or customer acquisition, and you'd be right. And that's the second thing we could list. So if one thing is unknown variables or unknown elements, just to keep the language the same here. So these are big pieces: sales, finance, operations. There could be other big pieces that we don't know about, we haven't defined, or maybe we do know about them, but they're kind of ambiguous. They're shrouded in a fog of sorts. You kind of get it, but not really. As an example, how to do a bottom-up market analysis. It's like, not really sure how to do that, right? The procedure for that isn't crystal clear. So there's things that are completely unknown, and then there's things that are just shrouded in ambiguity. So there's sort of a gradient there. But there's also a gradient within what we would call the elevation of the nodes. So for example, you may understand, hey, listen, sales is really critical. There's no mystery to that in my mind. I've got a really good idea of what sales is and what it means. It's how we stay alive as a business. But there are subcategories within sales, within marketing, within operations. There's things that are nested within that. Another way to say it is if you were to decompose a larger topic down into its component parts, you would find that there's a lot that goes into it. So, and in the same way, if you attempt to further categorize it up the hierarchy of business information, of business elements, there's things that it itself would fall into, kind of like a big family tree or something like that. For example, marketing could fall underneath pre-purchase. Pre-purchase could fall underneath acquisition. Now, this may just seem like a word game to those hard-charging entrepreneurs who are all about getting out there and getting it done. But I think if you stay with me here for a moment, I'll thread the needle for you, and you'll see why this actually supercharges performance in the real world. With a little bit of theory, a little bit of strategy goes a long way. Now, the nesting concept, or the decomposition concept, is very critical to understand. And let's see, we'll do a little bit of a favor to the audience and demonstrate this scale visually, right? You've got big things, and it trickles down into smaller things. As an example, I already mentioned this earlier, cheap and easy would be advertising, or social media, or cold outreach, referrals, etc. It goes down and it goes up. Now, maybe you've got a pretty decent concept surrounding the idea that, yeah, you got to do customer acquisition. You got to fulfill customers, you got to acquire them. In order to do either one of those, you need to have a business model, a strategy that's contextualized within an environment with a given state of validation or traction, right? Even if you're trying to open up a lemonade stand, that model is going to be contextualized within an environment, a given environment. That environment has different elements to it: macroeconomics, marketplace, industry, and key trends. Now, if you've never ran a lemonade stand before, or a t-shirt shop, or an e-commerce business, or a strategy consulting firm, or any of the innumerable other types of businesses we haven't worked with a lemonade stand yet, but there's always a first time for everything. There's some fundamentals. My point is, you may get this. For example, you may say, yeah, acquisition, easy. right? You don't have to do a lot of theoretical exploration around this concept. It's very clear. There's no ambiguity. There's no uncertainty in your mind's eye. So at this level of elevation, you're good to go. Now you zoom in a little further. Pre-purchase. Now what's the difference between that? Well, Professor Scott Galloway from NYU Stern School of Business and the guy behind Professor G's YouTube channel and podcast and section school, he's prolific. He's awesome. He talks about 3 phases: pre-purchase, purchase, and post-purchase. And I would argue that pre-purchase is distinctly unique from purchase. Obviously, I'm not the one that's made that up. But let's say you get a concept for what everything in pre-purchase is, right? Traffic channels, funnel, etc. That's not too shrouded in mystery. You go down, okay, well, maybe marketing is part of that, but we could even be more specific and just say, let's talk about traffic channels. Here, okay, maybe you know what that is. And then advertising. There we go. I'm getting a bit my rhythm here. And then a single platform, Meta, and then a single campaign where there's copy and creative and split tests, campaigns, and probably even ad sets beneath that. But that's pretty detailed. But as this goes down, this might become a work in progress for you. So for example, here's a cone. Now you may know that there's traffic channels such as referrals and ads and social media, but how well do you know the ads? Do you know how to advertise on X? Do you know how to advertise on TikTok? Do you know how to advertise on LinkedIn, YouTube, Google, pay-per-click ads? It's like Meta, Instagram, their WhatsApp, right? There's all sorts of different advertising platforms, but there's also all sorts of traffic channels and ways to exploit that. So maybe this is incomplete. There's some ambiguity at this level of elevation, and the same would go all the way down the chain. So for example, maybe you are a whiz kid at ads, but you don't know social media that well. And if you know both of those, maybe you don't know cold outreach that well. And if you don't know those, maybe you don't know SEO. So there's always going to be areas of ambiguity, and there's always going to be areas of uncertainty where you actually don't know. For example, maybe there's people who've never even heard that Snapchat ads are a thing. Maybe people don't even have any concept of what Snapchat is, as an example. So there's always that level of fogginess or haze, and then complete drop off of knowledge. That's just how it's going to be, because there's such a wide array of information available to us as business owners. But again, I want to bring you back to this crazy quote here from our pal Alan Dibb. What you don't know will hurt you. Now let's connect that to the first thing we said about our good old pal Jocko, extreme ownership. So if you're a business owner and you look at all of these little fancy notes here, special thanks to John for these yellow notes, which elements are you ultimately responsible for as a business owner? The answer is all of them. Every single one of these things. Now, that doesn't mean you have to do all of them. As an example, doing your own legal would probably be ill-advised. Same thing with maybe even filing your taxes, bookkeeping, accounting, all of that. You probably want CPAs and bookkeepers to help with all of that, but you're still responsible for it. You're still the one signing off on it all. So everything, whether you know it or not, is your responsibility. So there's something to describe this, and it's an acronym. In the military, we love our acronyms, and I've already got on a kick of referencing military stuff here, so I'll just keep that up. In the military, when we are encountering very challenging operational environments, we use the acronym VUCA. VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Now, just to pre-frame us, I've already been doing a bit of talking on these two things here. and certainly showing all of the elements here. And this is a baby step into the elements. Certainly, this has added one level to it, a dimension to it, is pointing at this fun little piece right here, complexity. So we've talked about uncertainty. This is unknowns, unknown variables. This is incomplete information, just to put it into colloquial terms. Now, this is first, and it's there for a reason, not just because VUCA sounds better than CUVA. Volatility is of paramount importance to recognize, to respect, and to understand. All of these things are changing. Every single node is in flux. It's liquid. So some things are changing faster than others. For example, a legal environment, a regulatory environment may change at a slower pace than something like consumer trends within a directed consumer e-commerce environment. Right? Those things are changing rapidly. A regulatory environment may change more slowly. One of them is like a jet ski pivoting. The other is like an aircraft carrier, to kind of put the speed of change, the rate of change to it. So there's dimensions of complexity within each of these things, which is even more insane. Let's see, John, go ahead and see if you can source an image of a fractal art, and bring that on in here for me. So all of it's changing. There's pieces that will always be uncertain. There's a ton of complexity to it. And then there's a ton of things that are always going to have incomplete information. VUCA. Now, let's talk about this in a battlefield kind of way. Now, we're really luxuriating in the ivory tower of theory here. But if you've ever heard me speak before, if you know anything about me, it's that my background is far from the ivory tower. In fact, if you know about me, my professional background started off wearing boots, going downrange, and doing foot patrols in southern Helmand Province, Afghanistan, with the Marine Infantry. This is me on the left carrying a SAW machine gun. Did 2 deployments over to Afghanistan. And this is a very practical environment. I can assure you that there's not much theory that takes place in the Marine Infantry. It's as boots on the ground as you could probably get outside of special operations and our other counterparts, for example, Rangers and such. Sort of comparable counterparts is what I'm saying. Now, we have a method that we employ, a few methods, but one of them that we employ against environments like this to win. Because ultimately, if we have a environment that is this demanding, and the stakes are very high, for example, lives are on the line. If we fail in this sort of operation, in this sort of endeavor, it could mean someone doesn't come back, and that someone could be ourselves, that could be more than one person. So it's mortal stakes. So anything we choose to use in support of our success typically has a lot of intentionality behind it. And we're very, as a community, as the tactical groups, folks that are in kinetic environments, those organizations are typically conscientious with how they bring experimental things out into a operational environment. They'll test them rigorously stateside, as an example, before you take something experimental to Afghanistan. So that's not a hard and fast rule. I'm sure that there's cases that you could tell me about in the comments below where that's completely wrong. But I believe it's fair to say, as a general rule of thumb, we are going to do what has proven itself to work. And we're big believers in doctrine. And these doctrines have been passed down over generations and consistently adapted to the lessons we learn in an operational environment. Now, one of the things that is as old as time itself, probably even older than warrior culture, I've got this awesome image here, golden era guys, they visually depict the area of operations. Now, this looks like World War II, obviously, and we have to appreciate VUCA has never been more true than in a place like that. Volatility, absolutely. Uncertainty, you better believe it. Complex, no doubt. And ambiguous, yes. Right? There's a bunker here. Does it have 20 guys in it? Does it have 500 because there's tunnels and to other elements that can be rapidly reinforced? Ambiguity, right? So trying to always provide that distinction between the two, uncertainty and ambiguity. Even with something with a smaller group of guys that doesn't involve all sorts of joint task force type stuff, there's still complexity. There's still moving pieces. Simply put, you think the bad guys are going to be here, they end up being here, right? When you get on the ground, you got to adapt and you got to move based on the realities on the ground. Dwight D. Eisenhower said something a long time ago. Let's see if you can reference this, John. If you can be Johnny on the spot and quick with the Google grab. Dwight D. Eisenhower said, he's a general, I believe, from World War II, that plans are ultimately useless, but planning is essential. And what I really respect about that is, and other elements about that concept have been echoed in other ways throughout history. For example, Mike Tyson, the world famous boxer, says everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. I love that quote, and it's speaking to the same concept from a little bit of a different vantage point, but it's still why I told you hard chargers that are all about action at the expense of any intentionality or a little bit of theory, to just bear with me here, and I'll thread the needle for you. I'll close this loop. So, what does Eisenhower mean when he says plans are useless? Now, there's a few variants of how this quote has been passed down over the years, but what he means is when you go into the operational environment and your plan said this was supposed to happen, bad guys are supposed to be here, but in reality, they're here. The plan is useless. Now, strategists will call the difference between these things as deliberate strategy and emergent strategy. All right, John, you can do it, man. Give me that reference point. Dwight D. Eisenhower, plans are useless. See if you can bring that quote in there. Google image. Deliberate and emergent strategy. So, on the one hand, plans are useless, but on the other, they're essential, according to Eisenhower. And the reason that they're essential, planning as an action, is critical. And in fact, I recorded a conversation similar to this with my colleague and co-founder Jack Hickler recently, where he says that people that go through the venture mapping process, as opposed to just receive it on the back end, or receive a completed model on the back end, have so much more, have gained so much more value and appreciation from it because of the exercise of doing it and the insights it provides. Now, you think when there's a number of different people, in this case, you've got a bunch of Marines somewhere out in Okinawa, probably, or these guys look like they're somewhere in the forest of North Carolina or Virginia. Now, these boots are not dry, I can assure you that. Now, the thing is, everybody sees the world through their own unique lens, through their own perspective and worldview. Now, even if you've got a lot of training, even if you've got similar personality profiles, which I think there's in any organization, there's a range of personalities, everyone's going to interpret ideas and what they're perceiving in a unique way. And that diversity of view is a strength, but it also can be a vulnerability. For example, when there's a high stakes operation where success is of paramount importance and failure could mean failure is tied to mortal consequences. There's unbelievable levels of complexity, incomplete information, unknown variables, and a lot of volatility. When that's the case, at a certain point, you're going to want everyone to be very much on the same page. In other words, all of these individuals want to be of one mind. Now, for those who have served in these sorts of units and have been fortunate enough to have great leadership and unit cohesion and have the trust and respect and camaraderie that's a fabled output of the military for all of history. That brotherhood piece is part of the legend of the military. Part of that is when you're operating, it can become a situation where there's a organism. It sort of feels like it's operating together as one organism, that being the team. So that's critical. That's how you perform effectively and with adaptability in an operations environment. Here we go. John, you're the man. So the planning is essential or indispensable, because it aligns the team during the preliminary phase. Before they cross the wire, before they embark in an operational capacity, there's alignment in the mental image level. Everyone's got the same idea. Now, if you're a lower enlisted grunt, you may know what they'll often do is they'll tell the lower ranking guy, whoever he is, or lower ranking individuals, they'll actually have them walk everyone through the plan before we get up and walk away. The lowest ranking member needs to understand their responsibilities, their role in the plan, and what their individual piece of the overall organization is doing at the very least. That's part of the culture. So we ensure alignment or relevant common ground. And then when we cross the threshold, we adapt. And what was deliberate strategy transforms into emergent strategy. Now, that's a bit of a lecture on the principles underpinning the venture map, why this exists in the first place. Several years ago, when we were recognizing a parallel in principles, in these first principles between military operations and business operations, entrepreneurial ventures, startups, we saw that volatility is a real world. Volatility is a reality for military operations and for businesses alike. They look different. The stakes are obviously different. One is life, one is livelihood. But I would still classify, having been in both environments, livelihood as high stakes. Keeping a roof over my family's head, food in their bellies, and the heat on during winter is pretty important in my book. And since business directly impacts our livelihood, that's up there. So every variable, every principle we've discussed within the acronym of VUCA and some of the surrounding pieces are all, we saw a equivalency between those in the private sector and in the defense sector, in the business world or the military world. In fact, what I would argue is that it's not a military concept, and frankly, it's not even a business concept. What it is a concept underpinning human endeavor. So human endeavor is what is really the concept that these principles are underpinning. And if you've got a different view on that in the comments, you go ahead and let me know. Now, so since there's alignment between the military component and the business component, that sort of business and military endeavors, I guess I'm stumbling over myself now, then you have to ask, well, how are we solving that in the business world currently? And how are we solving that in the military world currently? I've walked you through some of the ways that we solve that in the military world, and that is the terrain model. Now, that's certainly not an exhaustive list. It's one aspect to what is a very substantial body of knowledge or doctrine that we employ. But this is just one part of it. Now, on the other side, on the business side of the house, you think, well, how do we solve for VUCA in a startup environment? Now, there's a bookshelf back there with a couple dozen books on business. There's an Audible account with several hundred audiobooks and courses and all sorts of other stuff. There's unbelievable amounts of people in the world telling you how to run business successfully. So I'm not necessarily here to replace any of them or to even offer anything new by way of an approach. I'm just here to ask a few questions and share some of the answers that we found along the way. Now, a terrain model is unique because it visually depicts the reality of an operating environment in a holistic capacity. In other words, it would be ridiculous to have a terrain model where the operation will be going on in this whole thing, but the only thing that we build is half of it. We don't represent a giant chunk of it, or maybe the part that's not represented, we don't represent half of it there, but there's another part, the other half is represented from a different perspective at a different scale and through a different lens. And it requires a ton of interpretation. So when you're looking at this part, you think, okay, well, there's a road that goes, there's some buildings somewhere around here. You have to make that up in your head when you're looking at this. You have to imagine that. And then when you actually look at that piece, you got to turn your head, you got to squint, and you got to imagine, okay, well, yeah, that's right. There's actually other things. The road goes up, and then you're kind of comparing these two pictures. Your mind is doing the intellectual acrobatics to keep these things together. Now, obviously, that's ridiculous, and it would never happen. We have to visualize the entire area of operations in order for it to be considered holistic or comprehensive. Now, what's very interesting is we do that same ridiculousness in business every single day of the week. Solopreneurs, large corporations, everyone in between, every industry, every market. I admittedly have limited exposure to every industry and every market, but I have had the privilege of seeing a great number of them, of larger businesses, smaller businesses, and all of that. And I can tell you from my direct experience and also knowing a lot of business owners that fragmentation or silos or having this issue with integration and cohesion is not uncommon. And it's not because of a lack of effort. In fact, countless billions of dollars have been invested into solving this problem. That's why you see ClickUp, for example, has John, go ahead and see if, I know we got to wrap up here. See if you can bring me a quick screenshot just of the top of the ClickUp website and bring that in here for us. Just the top of the ClickUp homepage, clickup.com. ClickUp talks about the last app you'll ever need, the last app, right? The all-in-one app. And to their credit, it's pretty impactful, right? You got ClickUp as a all-around badass tool, unbelievable amount of capabilities. Asana, Notion, there's no shortage of these powerhouse tools. But even if you go inside of ClickUp, what are you seeing? You see a dashboard. Yeah, that's great with tons of cool stuff. But then you've got 24 different buttons on the left that take you to different viewports. That's cool. But when you're seeing the Gantt chart, you're not seeing the task list. And when you're seeing the task list, you're not seeing the team. And it's, again, this situation where you can only see a few of the pieces or one of the pieces at a time. Therefore, to bring us back to the original part, the only integration between all of these exists within the mind of the business owner of the team. You have to suspend that constellation in your mind's eye. You have to exert calories, mental energy to keep that alive, that mental image alive. And the reason you have to do that is because you have to have context and insight in order to make decisions. You have to make decisions in order to know what to do and to do that. In business, again, I'm giving you a shout out to all of my executors and motivators out there. It's all about action. You have to have a bias towards action and execution in this world. But you have to have intentionality behind that. And intentionality is best served with context. The final thing I'll say is, we'll get in the next time, is the military acronym of OODA, the OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, and act. You have to have context. Now, just to have that context, if you're running 50 apps on the CPU of your brain, to put it into a little bit of a geeky terminology, you're reducing the overall decision-making ability and energy that can be applied towards execution. Not to mention, you have no guarantee that the big picture, the big array of context you've had to build for your own head is the exact same as everyone else's, because it's implicit. It's not explicit. So this dude is seeing one picture. This dude is seeing another picture. The third dude doesn't even know what half the picture is. And there's no way to verify that besides using words, besides it being implicit, which causes all sorts of issues. And then people wonder why their teams are misaligned and why deadlines aren't reached and why there's waste of resources and why there's burnt out employees and a high attrition rate for staff. It's because of underpinning it is among this as a significant contributing factor. So, yeah, there you go, John, you're the man. Fantastic user interface, one of the best in the business, right? But still, it is, even with their whiteboard functionality, this is no map of the business. This is an awesome project management tool. It is not a holistic visual depiction of the realities of their business. So what we quickly found when we were researching this several years ago, trying to find a way to see everything in one place, to have something as simple as we do in the military. I mean, these guys are digging it in dirt after all. Certainly all of the sophistication in the business world would have something even cooler. And we didn't find anything. Now, Roots by Accenture, Ontology by Palantir, there's some amazing projects out there that do a bang-up job towards what I'm talking about now. There's some other smaller indie groups that have done stuff as well. For example, the Milky Way model is amazing. People oftentimes at this point in the conversation point to the business model canvas as well. Say, well, wait a minute, isn't that what Alexander Osterwilder did within Strategizer with the business model canvas? And I say, well, yeah, sure, but there's no elevation. You've got a bullet point list at best for your channels. So that's cool, but if you're going to look at your channels, you're going to need to have a whole other deliverable, or you're going to need something else. So then you're at the same place you were at previously. And a lot of times people will just store that in a Google Drive or desktop folder, and it doesn't actually solve the problem of a holistic visualization. So that is one of the problems that we think a lot about at VentureMap. That's one of the problems we've been pretty obsessed with understanding and solving for ourselves for many years, and have had the great fortune of solving that for a number of our clients. If you got any value from this video, go ahead and let me know by hitting the like button, give me a follow, and if you want to see more like this, or you've got a specific question, perhaps something you even disagree with, you can let me know by dropping a comment below. Otherwise, I appreciate your time, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.